Listeners, are you ready for your monthly literary adventure? We now have the BFF Book Club. Join us each month to explore a new book. After reading, connect with fellow book lovers and meet the author in a live interview. Can't make it live? Don't worry. We'll send you the recording. You can find all the upcoming book club selections at www.bookishflights.com/read/BFF Book Club. Hi, I'm Cara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, we have Nicole Miller joining us for the BFF Book Club. Nicole lives in Southwest Washington State with her husband and 3 sons, along with her 2 purebred Arabian horses, chickens, ducks, dogs, cats, and guinea pigs. When she is not writing or tending the animals, she works in human resources. Welcome to the club, Nicole.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and chat with everyone.
Yes, well, thank you so much for joining us today. We actually, well, I'm going to say listeners, but you guys are kind of members at this point. But Nicole was on an episode back in July of 2024. So I don't know if any of you tuned into that, maybe pre-hand or before that. But so I want to ask Nicole some new questions today, since she's already been a past Bookish Flights guest. But most obvious, let's start with you are so much more than this bio. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it comes back to like animals and family for me. Obviously, like my book is very centered around horses, and so horses have been a part of my life ever since I was a little girl. I've just always been obsessed with them, and that kind of led me down the path of loving history and the history of horses and different horse breeds. And I've had my own horses for a long time and showed them and done various things with them. I've done rodeo queen things in my youth and parades and stuff like that, which has been really fun. So it's always been just very central to who I am of having horses and taking care of them and loving the just connection with nature that comes with that. And so then, college, I ended up going to school for journalism because I love telling stories and writing, of course. And even along the way, I've just always been writing fiction. And so started writing fiction books in like the 6th grade and giving them to my teacher who was super supportive and sweet about it. But like they were, just very rudimentary stories back in the day that I handwrote in notebooks and then eventually typed up and all these things. So yeah, there's always just been this interplay between like history and horses and storytelling and then, throughout my life, had various different roles as far as like event planning and marketing and community work and then that led me into HR in different tech companies. So I've worked remotely for about 12, 13 years now, but worked for different San Francisco-based tech companies and really enjoyed that sort of industry and all the things that go with it. So yeah, just lots of different things. We have some property now with the 2 horses and chickens and always looking and developing more as far as like other animals to get and like grow our own plant or vegetables and fruit and stuff like that as well. So yeah, it's just been kind of all over the place and really enjoyed all of that. We also homeschool our 2 kids. The third one is only 5 months, so he just came around in last September. Had a book baby and a human baby in the same year. That was really exciting. So we're busy around here, but really love it. And yeah, just lots going on always.
Yeah, I don't think we talked in our last episode together that you homeschooled. I didn't know that
Yeah,
about you. That's
yeah.
awesome. So do the kids help you with the animals?
They do, and they really enjoy it. And so everything from, some of the chores outside to some of the like animal projects and things like that. Like we've, raised chickens and all that and hatched out chicks and all of that. And they really enjoy that sort of part of it. And then the youngest or the middle child now, the 7-year-old, he is in charge of most of the animal chores like himself. So he feeds the
Wow.
dog and makes sure the water's full and all that. I mean, I supervise all the horse stuff and all that too, but he certainly helps out quite a bit.
Yeah, that's great skills for them to have. For sure.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
giggling because my daughter is going to be 7 and her chore is to feed the cat. And we joke that the cat would be emaciated by now because she always forgets.
Yes.
So, and she got a new stuffy yesterday. She's like, I'm going to feed this stuffy every day. And I was like, how about we start with your real cat at the house? That's your job. So,
Hmm.
but normally she's very responsible. It's just, she's just not top of mind for sure.
Forgetful. It happens. It
So,
happens.
well, it sounds like you have been a very, like horses have been a center point in your life. And I think I've talked to enough authors at this point on the show, but it seems, you want to write a book that's something you want to spend a lot of time with. And
Mhm.
you and I had talked in our previous episode that you had spent a lot of time with this book, even over the years, right? Like this was not the iteration that you started with many years ago. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about your journey for writing Until Our Time Comes?
Yeah, definitely. So I mentioned I've been writing since the sixth grade. Well, the very early like origins of the novel that was published this last year, I had started back when I was 14 or 15 years old. And so, which at this point is like 24 years ago. I had been reading about this one particular horse, in Poland that had been captured by the Nazis and then later rescued. And it was just a really fascinating story. And it was only like 2 paragraphs in this like whole anthology of different like biographies of different horses and so like that just caught my attention, and again I started like writing just a story based on that, and rewrote it a lot, and then life goes on and I just kind of would go on to the next book or next thing. And later on, when I joined like a writers organization, started taking the craft a little bit more seriously, I revisited that manuscript and rewrote it. And then that probably happened another 6 or 7 times, I'd say, until like 2022, which was when, by that time I had signed with a literary agent, had gone to, dozens and dozens of conferences and pitched that book in various iterations. And I made some further updates to it in about 2022 and sent it out kind of for the last time. My agent and I were really talking about like this maybe the last time we kind of pitched this one in particular to publishers because it just wasn't seeming to like really hit, whether it was the location or setting or time or whatever the reason was. There were just
Yeah.
lots of things that just didn't seem to align.
Do they give you
Um,
feedback like that? Just out of curiosity.
Sometimes, yeah,
Okay.
sometimes they're just like, oh, we just don't have room in the catalog and it's not, you know, right or what we need right now. And other times I would get feedback. And over the years, this evolved a lot. And sometimes you're kind of like chasing the market a little bit because
Yeah,
at some points it was like, oh, the book needs to be um, based in the US because only like US based World War II books are selling right now. But the whole story like takes place in Europe, and so it wouldn't have made sense
sure.
to like have even half and half. Like I tried to make it work and it just didn't quite fit. And then other times it's like, oh no, European based is better, and so I had like half of it in the US, and so like it was just sort of like a little bit of a back and forth. And I think like if it finally worked when I came across the right editor who happened to love Poland, and went to Poland all the time and loved the history of Poland and hadn't heard of this particular story. And so she was really surprised that it was even based on a true story that happened in Poland during World War II. And so like I found the editor who was really passionate about it. Like the timing just really lined up that I think that version of the manuscript was sort of the strongest, because it was a little bit more focused on both like the story and being true to the like main events without being quite so like drawn out. I kind of had it more as like a trilogy before, and then we changed it to just a one book standalone. And so yeah, so it just kind of all like fell into place. And I loved that the title of the book ended up being Until Our Time Comes because it felt like there was just a long time coming for this novel to kind of come to fruition. And I'm glad that it was certainly I'm certainly glad that it was my debut novel because it really was one of the very original ones that I had been really passionate about. And then I also came to find out, like earlier on when I was working on this manuscript, that one of the horses that I have to this day, who's 25 years old this year, is distantly related to the horses that the story is based on. And so like it was just very fun to like come full circle around to the like, true story and inspiration of it.
Yeah, well, first off, I have to say I admire your persistence, right, in all of this because this is a many-year project and just that you kept with it. I think a lot of us would maybe be like, oh, no, I'm hanging my hat up. I can't anymore. But I admire that for sure. And then I loved this book, and you and I had kind of talked about this before, but there are so many World War II historical fiction novels out there, but it has never been about the animals. And it was just a whole side of the war that I had never even considered until I read this book. And it's so true of what did these horses do? I mean, this was their livelihood, the farmers or the ranchers or whatever. You could probably put a better term on that than I could. But yeah, I never even thought about what happens when war comes and ravages your country to all of that.
Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic. And I think we might have talked about this too. Like when you're taking care of animals, especially really big animals that you can't just like stuff in a crate and like put in the backseat of the car. Like there's a lot of different considerations. And so like the horses are the first thing that you can. I mean, same with your daughter. Like, and she'll get this one day. It's like the first thing I do is wake up and go feed the horses because like there's just like they have to have someone else feed them. They're entirely dependent on us. And so like there's just this different level of like care and responsibility for these creatures. And I think like in like times of crises, it's just a very different like perspective. Like there was one summer where we were really close to having to evacuate for fires, and it was not just pack up the house and go. It was okay, we need to have a place for our horses to go. We need to make sure we have enough hay for them so they have food. Like we need to be like able to put all like even the chickens need to be wrangled up and like put somewhere. And we even like during that same season, my brother and sister-in-law, they had to evacuate their home, and so we took their chickens over to our house so that they didn't potentially die of either smoke inhalation or whatever. And so there's just a different level of just care and yeah, like triage that has to happen in that sense. And so it is, I mean, something I can't even imagine on a scale of like war and global conflict. But these horses in particular and the way World War II and World War One absolutely devastated Europe in a very different way. It was almost maybe a little more depressing than what World War II looked like, where it was a very mechanized war, but horses still played a very pivotal part in many of the armies, aside from the more mechanized forces like Germany and Britain and even France. Like horses still played a major role in moving wagons and moving troops, and like there were cavalries that went up against tank divisions, which is just insane to think about. Obviously, a lot of that was in the very early stages because when the US came in, they didn't have a lot of horses. They had kind of shuttered the last of their horse specific cavalry right before World War II even broke out. So like it's just a really interesting thing because it wasn't even the like military horse forces that suffered during the war. It was the like farmers and specifically the story that I'm referencing and the novel is based on is a state-funded breeding farm in Poland. And so Poland is very proud of their Arabian horse breeding programs and has some of the most distinguished and like longest, standing breeding programs in Europe. And Arabians are descended from like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and a lot of them have gone into the UK, and there's a lot of American-based breeding programs as well. But Polish Arabians are very distinctive looking bloodline of the breed itself. And so there's been a long history of that. And in World War One, almost 95% of the horses in Poland were destroyed. And so almost the entire bloodline of these horses were gone. And then in the years between World War One and World War Two, they built that back up pretty successfully. And so then when World War II happened, the Russians took most of the horses in eastern Poland, and they were some of them did go into Russian breeding programs and were able to continue, but a lot of them were just gone. And then what was left in Poland, the Germans then seized, and they started building their own like super horse breeding program, which is a really interesting concept. And you wonder like why they would care about like breeding a better horse. But it was just absolutely something they were doing.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
seemed to be what they were after at the time.
They were after they did it with dogs too.
Yeah.
Super, yeah, like strange in that way. So yeah, like there was just this whole other dynamic. And this was just, I mean, yeah, those super played into my interests around like the horses and again the history of things and um yeah, just yeah, all the really interesting details that I had learned over the years and feeds into this really fascinating story.
Yeah. Did you have to do a lot of research to like, or had you, is more like you did all this over the years, but was there some that went in before, like pre
Oh, that's a good one.
2022 when you were writing this version of
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, a lot over the years. And luckily there was a couple books that came out a little bit more that were on the nonfiction side about these stories. Because there was this one 1960s book, and it was a biography of the single stallion that I really based like the main horse character after. There was like one story that is now out of print about this horse, and it was kind of a like fictionized biography of this horse and his like his journey through being captured by the Nazis and then later saved by the American soldiers at the end of the war. And so I only had that as like my basis. And so I didn't have a lot of information. And there's a lot of discrepancies even from like that story to the like historical accounts that I like later found from like, American reports themselves. Like there's, date discrepancies and distance discrepancies and all the different things. Um, so in 2019 and I think 2018, there were a couple other books that came out that were really more academic and better researched around this story in itself. And so that helped me with like filling in a lot of gaps that I just couldn't find. And then I piggybacked on a lot of their source information and was able to get more of the army records and things that I hadn't found to that point. And I think I got better at searching Google over the years as well. There are lots of, things to learn and things to figure out and more records now, it seems, than I had back in the day. So yeah, lots of time spent, lots of World War II books in the bookshelves back here. So lots of good things.
Yeah, it's always impressive how you all can take all the research you do and then compile it into this great novel that we get to read. So, what did you learn about yourself through writing this book?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think for this book, there was a lot of like learning to let go to some extent of like kind of how hard do you push to like get this to be the book that publishers want versus like holding true to the story or trying a different manuscript, maybe like a different story is going to be a better debut novel. There's a lot, I think, consideration for that like debut novel, like as far as making sure that it's something that readers are going to really get hooked on and want to see more from that author versus something that might be like too dark or foreboding or whatever that might be. So I think that I learned a little bit about being true to the story and like putting in the effort and then also knowing when to shelve it because again like there were so many times and seasons where really tried to make it work and like I overhauled it many times based on really good feedback. And then I would be like 6 months delayed and that would just miss that window or whatever, or just wasn't the right time. And so there's a little bit of like understanding the like importance of just having momentum and like building the craft and being disciplined in the craft. And I think like by writing other manuscripts, by getting better overall as a writer, by really learning to accept and just embrace feedback. That was a really helpful thing. I think I've always been pretty good about accepting, especially professional feedback, because of just the like constant rejections and they were always disappointing, but I still always felt that they were a badge of honor and like part of the process. And um so I think that was really good and important, and I'm really grateful that like writing is a side passion and something I'm going to always do, whether or not I'm published or whether the next manuscripts get published. And so I was able to kind of just keep that momentum going versus it sort of being like my main income or something like that. I've always had
Yeah.
something as a main job. And that has always freed me up for more creativity and like, ability to invest in my writing in a different way versus like it being the main avenue. So yeah, so I think it was really good. And I think I really do trust that like that manuscript and that book came at the right time
Yeah.
and to the right audience and like in the right format. I'm so much happier with it now than again, even the like last iteration of that manuscript. So that's been a really good thing to see.
Absolutely. Well, you have a very full life. How do you balance writing and reading, and how do you balance it all?
I mean, I don't know the balance. I'd say it's more of a seesaw, like honestly, in many, many ways. And I think when it comes to reading, a lot of what I do now is audiobook. I still have like I have a huge bookshelf behind me. It's really messy, otherwise I'd unblur it. But it like I love the idea of paper and hard copies, and I just never have the time to actually sit down and read them, especially with baby right now. But I have plenty of time to like plug in my AirPods and listen to things on the go. So I tend to do a ton of audiobooks when I'm consuming. And then when it comes to writing, I found, especially with like, especially lately with a newborn and that phase of life again, I've really found the value of just touching my writing at least once a day. And even if it's just opening the manuscript and reading the like last two lines that I wrote, it keeps it really fresh in my head. And then I'm like kind of thinking about the next two lines that I write every day. And I think Agatha Christie talked about this too, of like writing the scenes in your head while you're doing dishes. And like that's kind of the
I
only
like
way I think I
that.
can like keep connected and clued into my writing. And so sometimes I'll write 2 pages a day, and sometimes it'll be like no writing, but as long as I've opened the app to like, my Word app to like look at it and to like touch it and just like feel closer to my project, like that to me kind of keeps the like creativity flowing. And if I go too long, even if I miss one day, I swear then it takes me another week to get back on track. So I've really learned the value of like, even if I do nothing, like just keeping anchored to that in some way.
Yeah. So, can you tell us, do you have any upcoming projects that you're working on?
Yeah, so I am working on two more stories, also centered around horses and different like periods in history. One pre-World War II, one post-World War II, but very much historical romances with a strong female character and all of that, and horses as that central glue that holds the story together. So hoping to get those to my editor really soon. Baby, apparently is just not playing with my schedule as well as I would have liked, but we're keeping at it and we're gonna get those done pretty soon, I'm hoping.
Yeah, well, we can't wait to see them. You let us know, you keep
Thank
us
you.
posted. So,
You
you
will.
have also brought three books with you today, three new books. So, they're going to be different
Yes.
than our last time. So, can you tell us how you chose these books for today?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about, or I have three, two that are my recent historical fiction favorites, and then one
Okay.
that I just started that is one of my favorite authors that I'm going to love. I just haven't finished the book yet. So one of them is The Wings of Poppy Pendleton by Melanie Dobson.
Okay.
I love the story. I love all of Melanie's stories. She's a good friend and she is a fantastic writer and has done a ton of historical time slip novels. And this one is one of my favorites of hers.
Oh, I love the
And then
title. I
yeah,
haven't heard
Poppy
of it.
Pendleton is so fun and
Yeah.
it is a really engrossing read. So I highly recommend that one.
Okay.
My other recent favorite, I'd say like in the last like 2 years that I've read, was Yesterday's Tides by Rosanna White.
Okay.
And that one's really fun. It's a World War II story, and there's some intrigue, and it's just a really uh, I just read that one so fast and just really enjoyed it. So like that was a really easy, fun read, and again, I loved the setting and the it was a different sort of World War II story too, as far as like where it took place and all that too.
Oh,
So
perfect. Okay.
really good. And then my third that I'm just starting on now, just released in February, is Midnight on the Scottish Shore by Sarah Sundin.
Oh yeah.
And I love Sarah. She is like the queen of World War II fiction and has been one of my like mentors and inspirations the whole time I've been writing. So I love all of her books, and this one I'm really excited about, especially being set in Scotland because that's one of the countries on my bucket list at some point for sure.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. Well, thank you so much for bringing three new picks for us that we can
Mhm.
dig into ourselves. What I'd love to do, if anybody has any questions, we can open it up.
Honestly, you covered every single question I had on my list. So thank you for that. And I'm trying to think of some new ones, but I think I'll give some feedback. Of course, the story was great from start to finish, and I'm doing this thing now where I have the paper copy, so I'll read the first few pages, and then I go to audio
Mm.
just to kind of create the visions in my head of the characters. And the narration on this one again was like spot on.
Mm.
I love the cover because it just sets the helps to visualize the character, and I could see her. But I was very curious as to, how you find that word balance with
Mm.
family and work and writing. And do you write in isolation, or do you have groups, writing groups, or
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I do have a writers group that I've been a part of for I think almost 15 years now. It's been the same core group. A couple people have like moved and left and all that, but we went once a month in someone's home, and it has been like just a constant for us. We'll do Zoom if we're all sick or whatever, but like even through the last 15 years, like babies and all the different like life things for me, it's just been a constant thing. And we'll share like 15 to 20 pages each month and critique each other and edit it and encourage each other and bounce ideas off of each other. And they have been so pivotal for me as far as just that monthly accountability really does help keep that, that constant output going. And just like the encouragement and support and being able to complain about like characters not cooperating and all these different things that kind of just are so inherent in the writing journey. And so that's been really nice. And I'd say too, like there's certainly seasons where there's been more writing and there's seasons of less writing. And there's been times where I've not had any chapters written for the group and I just go and edit other people's and just say I'll get, a chapter next month or something. Because especially like certainly like around baby being born and all that, like there just wasn't time to get anything written. And I'll mention too, the other thing I have used as a tool, I'd say, throughout my career and my just time writing has been every November there's National Novel Writing Month, where the goal is to write 50,000 words in 30 days. And so you have to write about 1,700 words a day to not get too behind. And that to me, that sort of like 1 month sprint has been really good as far as just getting the rough draft done. And it's easier for me than to like time box it and say like, okay, for 1 month, like I'm just gonna be writing like every spare moment. And like my family knows it. Like my husband prepares for it. Like we do dinners differently. Like we plan the life differently for that 1 month. And just then I'm able to get like again 50,000 words. I'll usually try to finish in December. So I have 80,000 to 90,000 words on a rough draft. And it's just like again a known thing, and every year I try to do it. I've missed a handful of years over say the last 15 20 years of it, and but it's great because I probably have like 9 or 10 different completed manuscripts because of it, and so they're all sitting in my drawer and available whenever their time comes. So that's really helpful for me, but it certainly ebbs and flows, and like there's always things that have to give when it comes to all of the work and animals and family and writing and reading and all the other things that come with it.
well, you are an inspiration just like your main character. So
Oh, thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah, I think learning to balance all the things in life, right? I mean, that's like just a skill in itself. And just, yeah, I just don't have time for that right now. So I'm gonna have to set that one down and put it on the back burner and I'll move on to something else that's more pressing and just shifting all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's one thing. And I've had this lately of like balance is never a static thing. Like if you ever try like balance on like even a board, like the moment you stop compensating or like not adjusting your weight, you fall off. And so like
Yeah.
balance to me is just a constant movement. And if like you expect to like have everything perfectly scheduled, then you're just gonna fall down because like nothing in life is like ever like that. And so I'm not saying I'm good at this at all, but like that has been my latest like visualization that I'm trying to embrace right now because it's just been constantly one
Yeah.
different day to the next and all of that.
Yeah. Carrie, I see you got unmuted.
Hi. I'm so happy. Sorry about that. So I thoroughly enjoyed your story, and I can say I was a little hesitant about getting this book because I'm not a big horse person. I've had limited experience in it. I'm just like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to follow the story, but it was so beautiful. And like Kara said, it opened up an entire different world of what happened during wartime and the hardships. I just felt like I was telling my husband, I said, I felt like if we could read stories like this when we were in middle school, high school, we could actually understand history so much better. Your perspective on what people went through or could have went through, the rock and the hard place, escaping one extreme, running into the next, all of those things, and the characters you just wove throughout the story were I just loved every single component of it. So my question for you, as you have these characters and this darling little boy, he's a thief, he's mischievous, like right away I'm like, a thief, like, and everyone's kind of endeared to his little thievery, this little mischievous boy. um so when you're creating your characters, do you see people that you know in your real life? Do you pull from little tiny things, like you remember maybe a cousin from yesteryear or a nephew or something of that, and these little tiny personality traits go into your characters? And then I guess my second follow-up question is, did you end up becoming more endeared to one of your characters more so than you thought you ever would by the
Mm.
story?
Oh, those are great questions. And thank you so much. I really appreciate the compliments. Yes, absolutely. I love pulling things from like people I know. And in a couple of the projects I'm working on right now, I have just like like family stories that have inspired, like, great grandpas that have tales that have inspired kind of the heart of the story in one case, and then in the other, like I'm even referencing, I'm using one of my horses as like the example of this horse, and he's kind of a jerk of a horse, but he's a lovable jerk, and so we'll see how that plays off in the pages. But yes, absolutely, and same with characters, because I mean I think there's that like truth is stranger than fiction in some ways, right? And so it's almost like you wouldn't some things that are just inherent to certain people are so delightful that you couldn't imagine or even make that up, even in the most creative sense. And so I love getting to pull that in. And yeah, I think the character, the little thief, that Ewan is someone who I ended up using. It has it's just a sort of side character to start, and then he became like this really like driving force throughout the whole story. And I would say too, then it was even in the editing process that like a couple other scenes came in where he becomes the linchpin, and becomes the one that kind of like unlocks the next chapter of the story or the next like avenue. And those were totally like surprises to me, and like really a fun part of the creative process. And ironically, Holly, you mentioned the audiobook. We love the audiobook too, especially the narrator was really good. And my 7 and 9-year-old both have iPhones for Audible and the kids' Spotify apps. And so they have listened to my book on Audible multiple times. And my 7-year-old listens to it every night at bed. And his favorite character is Ewan as well. And so it was really fun because it came full circle. The kids really liked that story and thought he was funny. And we've then talked about like the importance of not stealing from that. But they loved that. And yeah, for him, I really saw him as kind of this cheeky, um, smart aleck character, and my oldest child is very much like witty. Like he doesn't have the like, thankfully, the stealing things per se, but he has that like wit and kind of challenging personality. And so I pulled that in a little bit from him too, especially over the years. And I mean, he was 4 or 5 when I was really working on this manuscript and modeling that off of him. So yeah, it's been fun.
I wanted to ask, do they still have this Arabian, like, I don't know if it's maybe a state program in Poland, but is
Mhm.
that still thriving and that's still a thing?
They do, yes. It is a
Okay.
beautiful farm in Poland, in that same city, same complex that
Wow.
survived World War II and the invasion, and has endured for many years. And they have shows there every year. They still breed and sell horses. Very high end, very expensive Arabian horses, all very wonderful. They have a hotel there at the grounds too, and so like again, I actually had been planning on a trip to go there right in 2020 as the
Oh,
as the pandemic broke out, and so I had to like scrap those plans, but it's okay. One day I for sure will go there. And Poland is a beautiful country to visit, from everything I've heard, and also very affordable as far as traveling there and within the country. And so, yeah, just a really spectacular area, and it's been fun to just watch that from afar as well. Follow their Facebook pages, all the fun things. So it's really fun to see it now in the modern world.
wow. That'll be a great dream trip for sure.
Yes.
Get you.
Mhm.
Um, I was gonna say that I loved this novel because wasn't just historical fiction to me. Obviously, there was the historical romance component, which I don't think I had read too much of that. And I will say, Nicole, after I read this last year, I then read a ton of historical romance last year because I realized how much I loved adding that piece. I'd always been a historical fiction fan, but adding that romance piece to it, I feel like it added some suspense, right? Because you're like, okay,
Yeah.
what's going to happen to them as a couple? But then also the suspense of this was like, what's going to happen to the horses? And I
Mm.
tore through this book because I just have to know what's going to happen. There were so many pieces I wanted to know, like, how is this going to work out? Where is this going to end? And so I tore through this book and I loved it. So
Love
that
that.
was a really
Thank
fun
you.
piece. So, and is it
Thank you.
Adia? Is that how I say it? Because I haven't read the audiobook. I only read this as hardcover.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have pronounced it Adia.
Adia.
And
Okay.
and so that's yeah, that and I honestly like I grabbed that name. This was like from like eighth grade where my one of my best friend's sister like wanted to name her kid that one day and like that name just stuck. You know, the funny way like certain things stick with you. So I don't but I like that name too. And it a lot of the characters' names have changed over the past 23 years, but that one always stuck. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I always thought of the Sarah McLachlan song that's
Yes.
Adia. So I was like, wait, in
Yeah,
my mind, I said that because it's spelled the same. So I was like, oh, it's that. How
for sure.
can you tell us? I don't think we've had anybody talk to us really quickly about the making of an audiobook. Like, how involved were you with that process and the actors, and how did that
Mhm.
go for you?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Because it's contracted separately. Like the main publisher doesn't do generally that production. It's
Okay.
contracted through essentially an audiobook publisher, and in this case, it was Reporter Books. And so they handle all the like it's like a separate contract and like a separate process. So the only thing like I really had to do with it was they let me know what was happening, and then they asked me for a pronunciation of that of Adia's name because the rest
Okay.
they were able to kind of just find, and they did a lot of great I was so grateful for all of the Polish pronunciations that I personally like still struggle with. So that they did a great job with all of those. But otherwise, like I just gave them that pronunciation, and I wasn't even sure when it was coming out. I didn't know if it would be ready upon the book release, and it happened to be, which was great and really fun because again, like we all and my husband even especially is an audiobook only person, and so he was able to download it and listen to it right away too, which was cool. So yeah, it was really interesting, and I didn't have much input or anything in that process, but it was really cool. And again, it was really surprising that it came out right when it released, which I was really excited about. So
Yeah. Did you have any like when you did have you listened to it on audio?
yes, it's
What
hard
was
for me to
that?
listen to it though.
Okay, I was gonna ask what that was like.
It's not bad. And, again, the narrator is fantastic. It's just hard for me like not to think like, oh, I should have changed that sentence, or like, oh, I could have written that better. Like you're just in that
You're
the
critiquing
beauty,
yourself.
yes, the beauty of publishing is like you have to stop at some point because you could edit that book like for eternity, and like having a deadline to just say, okay, like this is done, this is what it is the best I can get it to right now. Like I will always be able to make it different, but like it has to be, like cut off and sent out into the world because yeah, I for sure like will listen to something and be like, oh, like I never wrapped like that one thread of this one thing that I wanted to do and I forgot that or whatever it is. Like there's always something that I'm criticizing about my own writing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I could see where that would happen too. And then it's like almost like someone's reading it back too. So it's a whole nother form of that.
Yeah, for sure.
But next month we're meeting. It's actually going to be March 23rd, which is like a month-ish from here. March 23rd. And it's going to be featuring Tracy Lang. And hers is going to be more contemporary fiction. So this is a domestic suspense novel, and it's called What Happened to the McRaes. And the theme of this is family, resilience, small town life, and a middle school hockey team. And so it's going to be more contemporary since we've done Nicole, we did historical fiction back to back. So we're on going to contemporary. We're going to flop into some family domestic suspense for next month if you all can join us. So, but thank you all for coming today. This was so much fun, and I'm so glad you all could make it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all reading it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode today of the BFF Book Club featuring Nicole Miller. We hope to see you next month to speak with Tracy Lang about what happened to the McRaes. Please visit our website, www.bookishflights.com, and head on over to the BFF Book Club tab. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.